The stars had watched empires rise and fall for billions of years. They had seen species climb from mud to starships, and they had seen those same species burn themselves to ash. But in all that time, the stars had never seen anything quite like humanity. General Daniel Carter stood in the great hall of Concord Station, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes steady. He was 56 years old, with silver hair cut short and a face that showed every year of service. His uniform was simple compared to the others in the room. No golden threads, no floating symbols, just dark blue fabric with a few medals pinned to his chest. Around him, the hall stretched in every direction like a cathedral built for giants. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top, soft and white against the pale stone. Delegates from over 200 species filled the space, their voices creating a constant hum of noise. Some walked on 2 legs. Some walked on 6. Some did not walk at all but floated in tanks of liquid or hovered on fields of energy. The Galactic Concord had kept peace among the stars for 12,000 years. It was the oldest alliance in known history, and humanity had only been a member for 37 of those years. To the elder races, humans were children, newcomers, barely worth noticing. Lieutenant Grace Palmer stood at Daniel's side. She was young, maybe 28, with brown hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She held it in her hands, but her attention was on the crowd. She was watching for trouble. "They are staring at us again," she said quietly. Daniel did not turn his head. "They've been starring since we arrived." "Should I be worried?" "Probably." Across the hall, a group of stood in a tight cluster. They were impossible to miss. Each one stood over 8 feet tall, with bodies covered in natural armor that looked like dark red stone. They had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle, and faces that seemed carved from anger itself. Their eyes were black and empty, like holes punched into their skulls. They were one of the oldest warrior races in the galaxy. They had been fighting wars when humanity was still learning to make fire. To them, combat was not just a skill, it was a religion. Their entire culture was built on strength, honor, and the belief that the strong had the right to rule the weak. And they hated humans. Commander Kell was the leader of the delegation. He was larger than the others, nearly 9 feet tall, with scars running across his armored chest like rivers on a map. He had been watching the humans since they entered the hall, and his black eyes never blinked. "Soft creatures," he said to the beside him. "Look at them, no armor, no claws, no fangs. How did they ever survive on their world?" "They breed quickly," the other replied, "like insects." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Insects, yes, that is what they are, and yet they sit at our table, they speak as if they are our equals." He shook his head slowly. "The conquered grows weak." The summit began an hour later. Delegates took their places around a massive circular table that floated in the center of the hall. Holographic displays appeared in the air, showing maps of the galaxy, fleet positions, and threat assessments. Daniel Carter sat in the human section, with Grace Palmer behind him. He kept his face calm, but inside he felt the weight of what was coming. He was about to make a request that would anger a lot of powerful beings. The chairman of the Concord, an ancient being called opened the discussion. There were small creatures, no bigger than human children, but they were among the oldest species in the galaxy. They had given up physical bodies long ago and now existed as patterns of light contained in crystalline shells. "We will now hear proposals for the defense of Sector 9, the chairman said. His voice was soft, like wind through leaves. Daniel stood. Every eye in the hall turned to him. Some looked curious, some looked annoyed, the looked angry. "Chairman," Daniel began, "humanity requests the right to contribute forces to the Sector 9 defense grid." Murmurs spread through the hall. A few delegates laughed openly. "Sector 9 borders the void," Daniel continued. "The threats from that region are growing. Our fleet is ready. Our soldiers are trained. We want to help protect the conquered." For a moment there was silence. Then Kel rose from his seat. The commander towered over the table, his four arms crossed over his chest, his black eyes fixed on Daniel. "Help." His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You want to help." Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "That is what I said." "And what help could humans offer?" Stepped around the table, moving closer. "Your ships are slow, your weapons are weak, your bodies—" he gestured at Daniel with one massive arm. "Your bodies are made of water and soft meat. One blow from a fist would shatter every bone in your chest." "We've held our own in every fight we've entered," Daniel replied calmly. "You fought primitives and machines." Was close now, close enough that Daniel could smell the strange metallic scent of blood. "You've never faced a true enemy. You've never faced us." Grace Palmer's hand moved toward her sidearm. Daniel gave her a small shake of his head. "Not yet." "We're not asking to face you," Daniel said. "We're asking to stand beside you, against the real enemy." Leaned down, bringing his face close to Daniel's. His black eyes reflected nothing. "You will never stand beside us, human. You are not warriors, you are not soldiers." His voice dropped to a growl. "You are prey, and prey does not sit at the table with predators." The hall was silent. Every delegate watched, every camera recorded. Daniel Carter looked up at the massive alien warrior and did something that surprised everyone in the room, including. He smiled. "I've been called worse," he said, "by better." The insult hung in the air like smoke. His eyes went wide. No one had ever spoken to him that way. No one had ever dared. Around the hall, delegates held their breath. They could feel it coming. Something was about to break. Something was about to change. And the stars, ancient and patient, watched it all unfold. The summit continued for 3 more hours after Daniel's words, but the mood in the hall had changed. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. Delegates spoke in quiet voices. They glanced at the section. They glanced at the humans. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. Kel had returned to his seat after Daniel's insult, but he had not spoken again. He sat perfectly still, his 4 arms folded, his black eyes fixed on some point in the distance. But anyone who looked closely could see the tension in his body. His armored plates shifted slightly with each breath. His jaw was tight. He was angry, deeply, dangerously angry. When the chairman finally called for a recess, the hall emptied quickly. Delegates hurried to their quarters or gathered in small groups to whisper about what they had seen. The human general had insulted a commander in front of the entire conquered. Such a thing had never happened before. Daniel Carter walked to the observation deck on the far side of the station. It was a quiet place, away from the crowds, where a massive window looked out at the stars. He stood there alone, his hands behind his back, watching the slow spin of distant galaxies. Grace Palmer had wanted to stay with him, but he had sent her to get food and rest. She had not slept in nearly 20 hours, and Daniel knew that whatever came next, he would need her sharp and ready. So he stood alone, and he thought about home. Earth was 47 light-years away, a small blue world circling an ordinary yellow star. It was nothing special by galactic standards, no great resources, no strategic position, just another rocky planet in an average corner of an average galaxy. But to Daniel, it was everything. He had been born in a small town in the middle of the country, surrounded by wheat fields and open sky. His father had been a farmer. His mother had been a teacher. They had both died in the First War, when the machines came from the outer rim and burned half the planet before humanity learned how to fight back. Daniel had been 17 years old when he picked up his first weapon. He had been 18 when he killed his first enemy. He had been 19 when he watched his best friend die in his arms, choking on blood and asking for his mother. Now he was 56 and he was tired. Tired of war, tired of death, tired of watching young soldiers march into the darkness and never come back. But he kept fighting, he kept standing up, because someone had to. The sound of heavy footsteps broke his thoughts. Daniel did not turn around. He already knew who it was. He could feel the weight of the presence behind him, the way the air seemed to press down under the mass of the creature approaching. "Human," Kel's voice rumbled like thunder. "Commander," Daniel replied calmly. "You are alone." "I am." Moved closer. His footsteps shook the floor. When he stopped, he was close enough that Daniel could feel the heat radiating from his armored body. Ran hot, their blood like liquid fire. "You insulted me," said, "in front of the entire Concord." "I responded to your insult with one of my own." Daniel finally turned to face the massive alien. "That seems fair." "Fair's voice rose. "You think there is fairness between us. You think we are equals. I think we're both soldiers. I think we both want to protect our people. Beyond that, I don't think it matters much what either of us thinks." Leaned down, his face close to Daniel's. This close, Daniel could see every scar on this armor, every crack and groove from 1,000 battles. "Your people are weak," growled. "Soft, fragile, you break so easily. I have killed hundreds of species in my lifetime, human. I have crushed skulls with my bare hands. I have torn warriors apart piece by piece." His black eyes narrowed. "And I have never seen a species as pathetic as yours." Daniel's expression did not change. "You talk a lot for a soldier." Something shifted in his eyes, something dark and dangerous. "You should crawl back to your little blue world," said. "You should hide in your holes and pray that the real predators never find you. Because if they do, human, they will eat you alive, and no one will come to save you." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You don't know anything about us." "I know enough." "No," Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. "You really don't." For a long moment they stood there, the human and the alien, their eyes locked. The stars wheeled slowly behind the window. The station hummed with distant energy. Somewhere far away, a ship passed through the void, its lights blinking in the darkness. Then moved. It happened faster than any human should have been able to see. His upper right arm swung in a brutal arc, his massive fist cutting through the air like a hammer. He put everything into the blow, all his strength, all his rage, all his contempt for the soft little creature standing before him. The fist connected with Daniel's face. The impact was enormous. The sound echoed through the observation deck like a gunshot. Daniel's head snapped to the side. His body twisted. Blood flew from his face in a red spray that painted the window behind him. Any other species would have died. The fist carried enough force to shatter bone, to pulp organs, to end life in an instant. Had killed many enemies with exactly this blow. He knew what death looked like. But Daniel Carter did not die. He stumbled back one step, just one. His hand came up and touched his face, feeling the blood that ran from a deep cut above his eye. His nose was clearly broken, bent at an ugly angle. His cheek was already swelling. But he was standing. He was still standing. Stared at the human, confusion spreading across his alien face. That blow should have killed him. That blow had killed hundreds before him. How was he still alive? How was he still on his feet? Daniel Carter wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand. He looked at the red stain on his skin for a moment. Then he looked up at. And he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of something old and patient, something that had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "My turn," Daniel said quietly. And then came the crack. But it was not from Daniel. It was from his hand. Kel looked down at his hand and felt something he had not felt in over 200 years of combat. Fear. Two of his knuckle plates had cracked. The dark red armor that covered his fist, armor that had punched through steel walls and shattered the skulls of a dozen different species, had broken against a human face. Pale blue blood seeped from the cracks, dripping onto the polished floor of the observation deck. He had hit the human with everything he had. He had used the same blow that had killed warriors twice his size. And somehow, impossibly, the soft little creature in front of him had broken his hand. Daniel Carter stood there, blood running down his face, his nose bent at a wrong angle, his eye already swelling shut. He should have been dead. He should have been a broken corpse on the floor. Instead, he was smiling. How's voice came out as a whisper. How are you still alive? Daniel did not answer. He moved. It seemed like the human simply appeared in front of him. One moment, Daniel was standing 3 feet away. The next moment, his fist was buried in stomach, right in the soft spot between his armored plates. The blow was not powerful by standards. It did not have the force of a plasma cannon or the weight of a falling ship, but it was perfectly placed. Daniel had studied anatomy. He knew exactly where to hit. Doubled over, gasping. The air rushed out of his lungs. His forearms flailed wildly, trying to grab the human, but Daniel was already moving again. He grabbed one of his upper arms and twisted. It was a simple move, something Daniel had learned 30 years ago in basic training. Leverage and angles, physics and timing. It did not matter how strong your enemy was if you controlled their balance. Felt his body tip. He tried to catch himself, but his legs would not obey. The world spun around him. And then, with a crash that shook the entire deck, the 9-foot commander hit the floor. He lay there, stunned, staring up at the ceiling. The human stood over him, blood still dripping from his ruined face, breathing hard but steady. "Stay down," Daniel said quietly. Tried to rise. His arms pushed against the floor, his legs kicked beneath him. Daniel's boot came down on his chest. It was not a hard blow, just enough pressure to pin the in place. "I said stay down." For a long moment, they stayed like that. The human standing over the fallen alien, the blood on the floor mixing blue and red, the stars watching through the window like ancient judges. Then the doors burst open. Security forces poured into the observation deck, weapons drawn, shouting in a dozen different languages. Behind them came other delegates, drawn by the noise, their eyes wide with shock at the scene before them. Grace Palmer pushed through the crowd, her sidearm already in her hand. She took in the situation with a single glance. Her general, beaten and bloody but standing. The commander, flat on his back with a boot on his chest. The broken hand. The blood on the floor. She raised her weapon and pointed it at the crowd. "Nobody moves," she said clearly. A warrior stepped forward, his forearms raised, rage burning in his black eyes. "Release our commander, human, or we will tear you apart." Grace did not flinch. "This is a matter of honor. Your commander struck first. By law, this is single combat. Interference is forbidden." The stopped, his eyes went wide. She was right. Under tradition, single combat was sacred. Once a challenge was given and accepted, no one could interfere. To do so would bring shame on the entire clan. It was one of the oldest laws of their people. And had thrown the first blow. He had started this fight. By his own culture's rules, he had to finish it alone. The others stepped back, their faces twisted with anger and confusion. They wanted to help their commander. They wanted to destroy the humans who had humiliated him, but their own laws held them in place like chains. Daniel looked down had stopped struggling. He lay still, his black eyes staring up at the human who had defeated him. "Do you yield?" Daniel asked. Said nothing. "Commander, I'm asking if you yield. This can end now. No more blood, no more fighting, just say the word." The hall was silent. Every eye watched. Every breath was held. This moment would be recorded in history. This moment would be remembered for 1,000 years. Kell, commander of the war fleet, veteran of 200 battles, warrior of the highest order, looked up at the small, soft, fragile human who had put him on his back. And he saw something in those human eyes that he had never seen before. It was not anger, it was not hatred, it was not even satisfaction. It was mercy. The human could have killed him. In that moment, standing over his fallen body, Daniel Carter could have ended his life. A strike to the throat, a stomp to the skull, a dozen different ways to finish what had started. But he did not. He was offering a chance to live, a chance to walk away with some small piece of his honor intact. Closed his eyes. The shame was like fire in his chest. The rage was like poison in his blood. Every part of him screamed to keep fighting, to die on his feet rather than surrender to this weak, soft creature. But he was tired, so tired. "I yield," he whispered. The words hung in the air like the end of an era. Daniel Carter removed his boot from his chest and stepped back. He reached down and offered his hand. Stared at the hand for a long moment. Then slowly he reached up and took it. The human pulled him to his feet. They stood there face to face, covered in each other's blood. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The security forces lowered their weapons. Grace Palmer let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Daniel Carter nodded once to Kel. "Good fight, Commander." Then he turned and walked away, leaving a trail of red blood on the white floor behind him. The video spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within 1 hour, every major news network in the Concord had the footage. Within 3 hours, it had been viewed over 2 billion times. Within 1 day, there was not a single planet in known space that had not seen what happened on the observation deck of Concord Station. A commander, one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy, had struck a human general with a blow meant to kill. The human had survived. The human had fought back. The human had won. And this hand had cracked against the human's face. The question started immediately. How was this possible? Humans were supposed to be fragile. Humans were supposed to be weak. Every scientific report, every medical study, every piece of data collected over the past 37 years had suggested that humans were one of the most delicate species in the Concord. Their bones were thin. Their skin was soft. Their bodies contained no natural armor, no venom, no built-in weapons of any kind. And yet a human had taken a killing blow from and walked away. Medical teams from 12 different species descended on Concord Station within hours. They brought scanning equipment, testing devices, and questions. So many questions. Daniel Carter sat in the medical bay, his face wrapped in healing patches, his nose reset and bound. Grace Palmer stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the alien doctors with suspicious eyes. A scientist floated before them, its crystalline shell pulsing with soft blue light. "General Carter, with your permission, we would like to conduct a full examination of your physical structure." Daniel shrugged. "Go ahead, I've got nothing to hide." The examination took 6 hours. When it was finished, the scientist called a meeting of the other researchers. They gathered in a conference room, dozens of beings from dozens of species, all staring at the data on the screens before them. "This is impossible," said a doctor, his voice shaking. "These readings must be wrong." "We ran the tests 7 times," they replied. "The readings are accurate." "But they show," they trailed off, unable to finish. "They show that humans are not fragile," they said quietly. "They show that we were completely wrong about them." The data painted a picture that no one had expected. Human bones were denser than anyone had realized. They were not as hard as armor, but they were flexible, able to bend without breaking. And when they did break, they healed. They actually grew back stronger than before, building new layers of calcium around the damaged areas. Human muscles were capable of operating far beyond their normal limits. When threatened, the human body released chemicals called adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals temporarily increased strength, speed, and endurance to levels that should have been impossible. Humans called this response fight or flight. The scientific community would later call it terrifying. Human pain tolerance was extraordinary. Most species shut down when they experienced severe damage. Their bodies would go into shock, their minds would retreat, their systems would begin the slow process of death. But humans could keep functioning through injuries that would kill almost anyone else. They could lose limbs and keep fighting. They could be burned and beaten and poisoned and still drag themselves forward. But the most disturbing discovery was not physical. It was psychological. Humans did not just survive trauma, they adapted to it. Every injury they suffered made them more careful. Every battle they lost taught them new tactics. Every enemy they faced added to their knowledge. They were a species that got stronger through suffering. The scientist pulled up historical data from Earth, the of humanity. "Look at this," it said softly. "Look at what they survived." The room went silent. Earth was not a peaceful planet. It was a world of ice ages and volcanic eruptions, a world of predators that hunted in packs and diseases that killed billions, a world where the weather could turn deadly without warning and the ground could shake and swallow cities whole. Humans had evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them, and they had won. They had hunted their predators to extinction. They had cured their diseases. They had built shelters against the cold and the heat and the storms. They had spread across every corner of their deadly world, adapting to deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands that would kill most other species in hours. And when they finally reached the stars, they brought all of that with them. They had assumed humans were weak because they smiled, because they laughed, because they made music and art and told stories to their children. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. They had mistaken compassion for fragility. They had not realized that humans valued peace precisely because they knew what they were capable of when peace failed. A delegate spoke up, her voice trembling. "The report says that human soldiers have been known to continue fighting for days without sleep, that they can march for weeks on minimal food, that they have run down prey animals by simply following them until the animals collapsed from exhaustion." Persistence hunting, they confirmed. It was one of their earliest survival strategies. They could not outrun their prey, so they simply never stopped chasing it. They would follow an animal for hours, for days, until it was too tired to flee. The room was very quiet. "They never stop," someone whispered. "No," they agreed, "they do not." On the other side of the station, Daniel Carter sat alone in his quarters. His face hurt. His body ached. He was tired in a way that went deeper than bones. Grace Palmer knocked on his door. "Come in," he said. She entered and stood at attention. "Sir, the Concord Council has requested your presence at an emergency session tomorrow morning." Daniel nodded slowly. "I figured they would." "Sir," Grace hesitated. "What happened out there, the way you fought, I've never seen anything like it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at her with tired eyes. "I've been fighting since I was 17 years old, Grace. I've been hurt more times than I can count. Broken bones, torn muscles, burns, cuts, things that should have killed me." He shook his head slowly. "We all have. Every human soldier, every human survivor, every human being who ever lived through a hard day and woke up the next morning. We carry our scars with us, and we keep going." He looked out the window at the stars. "That's what they don't understand about us. We're not strong because we can't be hurt. We're strong because we can be hurt, and we get back up anyway." Grace said nothing. There was nothing to say. Outside the window, the galaxy turned slowly in the endless dark. And somewhere, in 1,000 different war rooms on 1,000 different worlds, military strategists were rewriting everything they thought they knew about humanity. 3 months passed. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The video of the fight had done more for humanity's reputation than 3 decades of diplomacy. Species that had ignored humans now watched them with new eyes. Powers that had dismissed them now sent ambassadors with offers of friendship. Trade routes opened. Military alliances formed. Doors that had been closed for years suddenly swung wide. Commander Kell was recalled to the in disgrace. His broken hand became a symbol that every warrior in the Dominion recognized. He had struck a human with a killing blow. The human had survived and had cracked. Some called for war. They wanted revenge for the humiliation their commander had suffered. They wanted to burn Earth and scatter humanity across the void like dust. But the elders of the Dominion refused. They had seen the data. They had read the reports. They understood what humanity truly was. And for the first time in 12,000 years, they looked at another species and felt something other than contempt. They felt respect. Daniel Carter returned to Earth for 2 weeks. He visited his parents' graves in the small town where he was born. He walked through the wheat fields that still stretched to the horizon, golden in the summer sun. He sat on the porch of his childhood home, now empty and quiet, and watched the stars come out one by one. Grace Palmer found him there on his last night. "Sir, the transport leaves at dawn," she said. "The Concord Council is waiting." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know, just wanted one more night here." Grace sat down beside him on the old wooden steps. They were silent for a long time, listening to the crickets and the wind. "Do you think it will be different now?" she asked finally. "The way they see us?" Daniel considered the question. "Maybe, for a while at least, fear fades, memories get short. In 100 years they'll probably forget all about this." "Then why does it matter?" "Because we have 100 years to prove ourselves." Daniel looked up at the stars, at the tiny points of light that held 1,000 civilizations. 100 years to show them who we really are, not the monsters they might fear, not the weaklings they thought we were, something in between, something better. Grace nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, but she trusted him. She had trusted him since the day she joined his staff, and he had never given her a reason to doubt. The next morning, they returned to space. The Concord Council met in the great hall where everything had started. The same marble walls, the same high ceilings, the same floating table surrounded by hundreds of delegates from hundreds of worlds. But something was different. When Daniel Carter entered the room, every being stood. It was a sign of respect, a gesture reserved for the greatest heroes and leaders of the Concord. No human had ever received it before. Daniel walked to his place at the table. Grace Palmer walked beside him, newly promoted to captain for her actions during the incident. The scar on Daniel's face had healed to a thin white line, a permanent reminder of the blow that had changed everything. The chairman of the Concord, the ancient in his crystalline shell, spoke first. "General Carter, this council has reviewed the events of 3 months ago. We have examined the evidence. We have heard testimony from witnesses, and we have reached a decision." Daniel stood at attention, his face calm. "The human proposal to contribute forces to the Sector 9 defense grid is approved, unanimously." A murmur ran through the hall. Unanimous approval was rare. It meant that every species, every faction, every delegate had agreed, even the... Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, Chairman. Humanity is honored to serve." "But there is more," the chairman continued. "This council has also voted to create a new position within the Concord military structure, a position that has never existed before." Daniel frowned. This was not in any briefing he had received. "We are creating the role of strategic advisor to the combined fleet. This advisor will have authority to coordinate defensive operations across all sectors, to develop new tactics and strategies, and to serve as a bridge between species in times of crisis." The chairman's crystalline shell pulsed with warm light. "General Carter, we are offering this position to you." The hall fell silent. Daniel stood very still, processing the words. This was not just an honor. This was power, real power to shape the defense of the entire galaxy. He looked around the room. He saw delegates who had once dismissed humans as too emotional. He saw elders who had wondered if humanity was intelligent enough to be trusted. He saw who had hated his species for 37 years. And in the front row, he saw a new face, a young warrior, smaller than but with the same dark red armor. This was replacement, sent to represent the Dominion. The young met Daniel's eyes. There was no hatred there, no contempt, just quiet curiosity. Daniel turned back to the chairman. "I'm honored by this offer," he said, "and I accept, but I want to make something clear to everyone in this room." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Humanity doesn't want war. We've had enough of it. We've buried enough of our children. We've cried enough tears. We came to the stars looking for peace, looking for friends, looking for a better future than the one we left behind." His voice was steady and strong, carrying to every corner of the great hall. "But if war comes to the conquered, if any of you are threatened, if any of your children are in danger, you need to know something about humanity." He looked around the room one last time, his eyes meeting the eyes of 100 different species. "We don't break, we don't stop, we don't give up, and we never ever forget our friends." The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the young delegate rose to his feet. He brought his 4 hands together in the gesture of respect, a salute reserved for the greatest warriors. One by one, other delegates followed. Species that Daniel could not even name. They rose and offered their own gestures of honor, their own signs of respect. Grace Palmer stood behind her general, tears running down her face, watching as the galaxy welcomed humanity at last. The applause began slowly, then grew, filling the hall like thunder, like music, like the sound of a new era being born. Daniel Carter stood in the center of it all, a small figure in a simple uniform, the scar on his face catching the light. He had been hit with a blow meant to kill him. He had gotten back up. And now, finally, the stars knew what that meant. Outside the great windows of Concord Station, the galaxy turned slowly in the endless dark. Billions of stars, trillions of worlds, countless species living and dying and dreaming of tomorrow. And among them, no longer ignored, no longer dismissed, no longer alone, humanity had found its place. Not through conquest, not through fear, but through something far more powerful. Through the simple, stubborn, unbreakable will to stand back up,